Hi, Elaine here. Today I'll be sharing how to create a great layout for note-taking in Affinity Publisher. You may be familiar with the Cornell note-taking system, or, alternatively, you may never have heard of it. Either way, a short explanation is probably a good idea. The Cornell note-taking system is one of the best ways to take notes. But why? Well, notes are easy to create, they promote great understanding of the material, and it's the perfect design for reviewing your notes. It has a long history originating in the 1950s at, unsurprisingly, Cornell University. Here's what the structure of the system looks like. There's 3 or 4 distinct areas. There's an optional title or metadata area at the top of the page, a middle section split into 2 columns. A 30%-70% split is common, but I prefer the left column to be a little wider. Finally, there's a summary area at the foot of the page. The main notes go in the middle block on the right. The middle block on the left is used to host keywords and questions about the notes. The bottom block is used to create a summary of all the other content. And being this intentional with your note-taking and actively summarising your notes means that you have revision-ready notes with very little effort. What we need to do today is to create this design in Affinity Publisher. I'm starting with an A4 page, but you can use whatever size you prefer. The first thing I'm going to need is a table. As is common when I create tables, I don't bother trying to draw it out to the precise size. I know here I'm going to need 2 columns. And rows I've calculated 36 should work well. Then all I need to do with that is to select the table, and I'm going to have it covering the entire page, and I need to scale the columns into my preferred split, which would be much easier if we could actually see that, so I'll just rescale it fractionally. And I'm going to have the column A be 60 millimeters. Column B will take up the rest of the space. Because row 1 is going to host the metadata, I'm going to have that taller. Using the table panel, I'm going to set the height directly in the text box to 16 millimeters. Now if I do that, my table expands and starts hanging off the end of the page. What I'm going to do is just scoot that back up. Now that will have had a negative impact on the height of all the rows, particularly this one that I've just set. Now instead of being 16, if you check the height, it's 15.6. It was still worth my while typing it in, even though I need to go back and tweak it slightly, because otherwise it gets very fiddly. What I'm going to do with this now is hold the Shift key down and pull this down so it is 16 millimeters again. Now, row 2 is different in size to all of the other rows. So selecting row 2, holding the Shift key down and selecting the last row, and then right-clicking and choose Evenly Distribute Rows. And that will solve that problem. All of the remaining rows from 2 to 36 are now 8 millimeters tall. Now we need to consider how we're going to replicate the areas required in the Cornell Notes system. Row 1, my 2 cells at the moment, need to be merged together. Selecting those, right-clicking, and the very top option is Merge Cells. If you've ever used Excel, this is probably familiar to you. Now I also need at the bottom here to have the bottom 6 rows merged. So again, select the 2 cells and repeat that with all of the rows I need formatted, which was 6. And we have the basic layout, but it would be much easier here if we utilise the borders as demarcation lines as well. I'm going to select the entire table, and at the moment the default borders, all of them, are black and they are 0.5. I want a slightly different colour there, I want them grey, and I'll also change it from 0.5 to 0.2. So they're very light. I don't want them to detract from the actual notes, but I'd like to delineate the areas clearly. So that first cell at the top, I'm going to put a bottom border on it, and instead of it being 0.2, I'm going to make that 1. Clicking away, you can see that has made a huge difference. Now selecting the 2 cells that are row 30 and doing exactly the same to that, which is the bottom border, and changing the width from 0.2 to 1. Then selecting all the cells in the right-hand block in the middle and setting the left border the same colour, but again 1 point. And we have those areas made much clearer. If you want to take notes about different subjects, it may be a good idea to have differently coloured notes pages to do it on. Very simple to do that. I'm selecting all the cells in that table and applying a fill to it. And I have a range of colours here, so we'll start off with yellow, but I could use any of the colours that I have there. You may even want to have the 4 areas different colours themselves. You may prefer that top cell to be, let's have green for meta. And this left side here, blue. And at the bottom, we could have that, probably peach, I think, which is an alternative. I'm not at all sure I would find that helpful, but your mileage may vary. And that is how you make Cornell Notes pages in Affinity Publisher. Let's have a quick recap. I used a single table. The sizing is up to you and your specific requirements. I used an A4 page with 36 rows. The first row was 16 millimetres tall. Rows 2 to 36 were 8 millimetres each. The first column in the middle I set to 60 millimetres. And given that this was an A4 page, that means column 2 was 150 millimetres. Then I used the merge cells technique on the first row to create the header or meta row, and on the last 6 rows to create that summary block. Then I used borders to delineate the separate sections, and then formatted it with either a single colour or multiple colours to clearly define the separate areas of the notes. And there's another great use for tables in Affinity Publisher. If you want new tutorials and tips and tricks on a regular basis, check out my free training at elainegiles.com/VIP. Hit the subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss future tutorials. And if you have any requests for specific tutorials, be sure to contact me. I would love to hear from you. Thanks for watching and see you next time.